So on your blank notability doc, I'm going to have you practice a little bit with me. I want you by the end of the hour to be able to find the solutions to a quadratic by factoring. Well, first of all, what the heck is a quadratic? That's a quadratic. That one doesn't actually factor. So then how in the heck would you find the solutions to that? You guys remember, if you can factor it, you should, but what if you can't factor it? You could use the quadratic formula. Very good. Okay, but this first goal here is about factoring. So there's several different kinds of factoring. You can get it to factor an x out of everything, and then it like has a couple sets of parentheses. That's one of the harder kinds. Or one of the kinds of factoring that I'd want you to be able to do would be like where you have a 2 in here. So that kind of factoring is on your next test. So we got to get good at all the kinds of factoring. All right, let's say that we had got a factor to this though. Then the answer for this one's super easy. It's just x equals -5. Would you all please figure out the answer to that side? Don't overthink this. It's a fraction answer. Just trying to make it equal 0. The answer is a fraction when you're done. And if you're not sure what to do, there's a kid next to you. And I'm going to have you compare answers with them in just a second. So these 3 of you, otherwise the people straight across. For today, Sean, make sure that the kid in the back is somebody to compare with because there's nobody back there. A lot of advantage gets gone today. These 2 rows, straight across, except for you guys are in group of 3. All right, and then you 2 work together, and you 3 work together. All right. This is not meant to be a hard one, it's meant to be an easy one to start it off. What's the solution to that part? Did you already compare with that kid behind you? Did you guys get the same thing? All right. I'm guessing most of you are like, come on, Mr. Server, this is too easy. Just set it equal to 0. But there's usually a few kids that get this wrong on the test, and I'm trying to prevent that. All right, so 3 over 2. And the other one is -5. I want you to see, though, really quick, if I stick 3 over 2 in here, watch why it works. The fractions cancel. That 2 and that 2 cancel because one's multiply and one's divide. And then you're left with 3 minus 3, which makes 0. That makes sense? We're trying to make that equation equal 0. So there's 2 things that make it 0, that and that. They're called the solutions. So that's one of the things that I want you to know by the end of the hour. But we got to be able to do harder factoring than that. So we'll practice that again in a second. The other thing that's the goal for today is for you to be able to say that you can graph the set of solutions. In case you're like, what do you mean by that? Say this is 2 and this is 5. And I go like this. That means the answers are between 2 and 5. Do you get that that's a set of answers? And you'll have that anytime you have a less than or greater than kind of problem. All right? And there's 3 kinds that I reference. Quadratics, that's like this, where you can factor them. Or absolute values, that's like this. Or radical functions, which are like this. That's the one we haven't talked about very much. So let's talk about that one. Everybody write that one down. Do you remember how to get rid of square roots? Because we're trying to solve this thing. What fixes a square root? Say it if you know it. Be bold.
Square it.
Square it, yeah. You just got to square it. Now, here's the problem. Some people think, so you mean it's x squared plus 16? No. When you square both sides like this, that does not come out with x squared plus 16 over there. It's just x plus 3 here, but that one is more intense than that. Everybody please multiply that all the way out, and if you're like, I thought it was x squared plus 16, just put another x plus 4 here, because that's what squared really means. And then multiply it all the way out. Go ahead and do that, and you'll find out you've got a quadratic again. So we go back into that quadratic thing where it's like set it equal to 0. If you can factor it, you should. If you can't factor it, you could use the quadratic formula. That's how you'd start. Then you got to get it all to one side to equal 0. If your quadratic starts with a negative, then you should put it on the other side. Like if you've got negative x squared plus blah, 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 it's not going to work. So instead, you should move everything to the other side, which means like put them all over to the other side, which means like add or subtract them to get them to the other side. Or you could multiply by a negative. Once it's equal to 0, it's pretty slick. You could multiply by a negative. All right, so moral of the story, I'm just trying to say don't have a negative in front where this thing is going to be really hard to factor. All right, so you should add x plus 3 equals x squared plus 8x plus 16, and then you would subtract x from both sides. But I wanted to put it to the other side. Well, then you'd have a negative x squared in front. Not a great idea. You want positive x squared plus 7x plus 16, and then I'm going to subtract 3, and it'll be 0 equals x squared plus 7x plus 13. How many of you got that far? Raise your hand if you did. Awesome. Now, if you can factor it, you should, but you could play with this like all day, and you'd never find something that would make it work. Like you could know that it was plus and plus, you could know it was got to be a 13 and a 1, but there's no way to make that be 7. So you're stuck. If you can factor it, you should, but if you can't factor it, you use the quadratic formula. Okay, so I don't even need you to finish this one. I'm just trying to show you that's a radical equation. Remember how it started with a square root in it? I'll highlight it right here. We got rid of it by squaring both sides. All right, at the end of a problem, and you got it down to this is a really typical problem, and it says greater than 0. That is supposed to remind you of the tip of a number line, which looks like that. Would you please put 2 spots on here, one for each of these answers, and then figure out if it's empty circles or filled in circles, and then test the regions and figure out, is the answer in the middle, like in here, or is the answer on the outsides? All right, so this is your final little reminder of testing intervals, it's called. And that's how you tell where to shade. All right, so first off, if you didn't know x equals 5 was one of the answers, that'd be really sad. We just did this one a second ago. And this one was 3 over 2. Do you remember that? Okay, so you got 2 answers, 5 and 3 over 2. They go here, and you got to know which one goes on the left. Then you pick a number that's between them. So like, what's a little bigger than 5? 6. What's a little less than 5? Maybe 4. Or you could test 0. That's another good number to test. And see if it works. What I mean by works, you're going to put it in here and here and see if it's really greater than 0. All right. By now you should have known that this was 3 over 2. And this was 5, and that they're empty circles because there's no or equal sign. And now you're down to the testing. Everybody test 6 and see if 6 works, and if it does, you'll shade that area in. Now to pause for a second while you test all 3 intervals. In this range, I'd probably test 0. Here, I'd probably test 4, or some number that's a little less than 5. If it helps you, you can write 3 over 2 as 1.5. Some kids like that. All right, so test your intervals, and I'll pause for a second while you give this a shot, and then you're going to compare with the kid next to you. Which interval do you think it was? In the middle or on the outsides? So, and asking the class, pretty much everybody thinks it's on the outside, and I'm not saying you're wrong at all. I'm just going to show you another way that you could do this. Would you agree that this is a parabola? Because it's a quadratic, so it's a U shape, right? And that the x-intercepts here, those x-intercepts, are like these two numbers right here and here. So I don't know if you've ever thought of it this way, but your parabola would go through it like that. And when it says bigger than 0, that means above the line, which is like here is where the parabola is bigger than 0, and here is where the parabola is bigger than 0. So that means this area works and that area works. You know, for some of you, that's going to be like, oh, that just fell into place. I totally get that. And others of you, that was like a plane going way overhead. And it's okay. You don't have to understand that. What you have to understand is if you test 6 and you put a 6 in here, that then this comes out to 6 minus 5, which is 1. And this comes out to 12 minus 3, which is 9. And then I have 9 times 1, which is 9, is bigger than 0. And 9 is definitely bigger than 0. So it worked. So you shade in out here. When you test 4, it doesn't work. And what I mean by that is when you put in the 4, it will make a false statement. See, it says 8 minus 3 is 5 times negative 1, which is negative 5. And it says negative 5 is bigger than 0, which is false. So that's out. All right. So there's your answer. Now, last thing. What if my colleagues are nasty, and I'm going to blame them, and they say you must answer in interval notation? Well, this number line's an awesome way to start, but do you know how to write the answer with intervals? Do it. Write it underneath. These are things like numbers and commas, and brackets, and parentheses. Should have said negative infinity, or you can use the infinity symbol, up until it keeps working, you know, it's shaded, up until 1.5 or 3 over 2. I'm going to use 3 over 2. And then that doesn't work, so use a parenthesis, because it's an empty circle, because it's not an or equal to sign here. Union, how many remembered the U in between? Nice. It's at least half of you. 5 to infinity. Why doesn't the 5 have a bracket? Because it's an empty circle. Why is it an empty circle? Because there's no equal sign here. There you go. That's a review of pretty much everything. Now, I know there's a few of you that got little holes, little weaknesses in different places, but this is the part where for the rest of the hour, I want to have more time than usual for you to ask me for help, and I'm going to give you a Schoology quiz that's 5 points, and I hope is like super easy, okay? Then, after that's done, you can come up and grab this little 5-question quiz, which is all meant to get you ready for the test. It's like a review for the test, okay? And this 5-question quiz is on paper. This one, you can work with other kids near you, okay? So I strongly encourage you to get in a little group and like work through these together. By the end of the hour, we're going to grade this puppy, and you'll know, am I getting this, or am I really kind of lost on this one? Okay, so you should have really good feedback to whether you're getting it or not. And then your homework for tonight is to just do the same thing I gave you last night. It was just too big, and I sent out an update. If you read my updates, they'll help you. And I said, you don't have to finish that thing, because it was really too long. Well, then your homework for tonight is to just finish whatever you didn't do last night. Okay, so if you already did that whole thing, awesome. If you didn't, this is the most important assignment because it's the last assignment before you take the test. So you really, really need to dig into that, whatever you didn't finish last night, and finish it tonight and check it with the key. So, the little Schoology quiz, I haven't actually opened yet. I'm about to do that. Then you come up and get this paper quiz, 6 questions actually, and that can work in a group. Then your homework is the same homework as last night, and that's all I got for you for today.